Right now, inside a clearinghouse in Chicago, a clock is ticking. And when it hits zero, tomorrow, some of the most powerful traders in the world face a choice that could unravel one of the most consequential financial markets on Earth. This is not a prediction. This is already printed on a calendar. But before I show you why that clock matters, I need to show you something that will permanently change how you see every market, every currency, and every commodity you have ever trusted. Because what is happening in silver right now is not a silver story. It never was. It is a story about paper, and about what always happens when paper meets physical reality. I'm going to show you a pattern that has repeated in every major financial system for over 100 years. And once you see it, you will never look at a market dip, a margin hike, or a policy response the same way again. Start with one number, $251 trillion. That is total global debt as of 2024, confirmed by the IMF as exceeding 235% of everything every country on Earth produces in a single year. The world owes more than twice what it earns. That is not a fact about distant governments. That is the ocean every single one of us is swimming in right now, and silver is simply the place where the current finally broke the surface. Here is the core claim, and I will prove every word of it before this ends. The short side stress you are hearing about, 25 million ounces being demanded for delivery, margin calls starting tomorrow, none of it is an accident. It is the predictable, mechanical, inevitable result of a four-stage pattern that has destroyed monetary systems, erased generational wealth, and forced emergency rule changes at the highest levels of financial power. Every single time it has ever played out. And right now, in real time, we are sliding from stage 3 into stage 4. Let me give you the coat check first, because this is the whole thing. You open a coat check at a concert. You collect 100 coats. You hand out 100 tickets. Completely legitimate. Every ticket represents a real coat on a real hook. But then you notice something. Almost nobody claims their coat during the show. They are drinking, dancing, talking. So you start printing extra tickets and selling them. 200 tickets for 100 coats, then 300. The coat check is printing money it was never supposed to make. And as long as the concert runs forever and nobody rushes the counter at the same time, nobody ever knows. The system looks perfectly healthy from the outside. Then the show ends. Everyone heads for the door at once. And the entire architecture is exposed. That is the setup. That is exactly how every paper-based financial system in history has moved from legitimate credibility into catastrophic fragility. The only variable is which asset is hanging on which hook when the crowd arrives. Now the 4 stages. I am not presenting these as metaphors. I am presenting them as a fixed mechanical sequence, because the incentive structure that generates them never fundamentally changes. Stage 1 is always the foundation. A legitimate system forms around something real and finite. Gold, silver, land, energy. Settlement is credible because anyone holding a claim can actually convert it into the underlying thing. Trust is earned, not assumed. Stage 2 is where the machine gets quietly corrupted by its own success. Financial actors realize they can write more claims than the base supports, because at any given moment not everyone is asking for settlement at once. Banks lend more than reserves. Exchanges list more paper volume than physical supply would ever cover if it all came due simultaneously. Nobody stops it because everyone is benefiting. The leverage feels like genuine liquidity. It feels like growth. Stage 2 is the part everyone defends, because in Stage 2 the music is still playing and the bill has not arrived. Stage 3 is where it fractures. A shock arrives. A war, an inflation surge, a supply disruption, a political collapse. Or it could simply be a rational decision by enough participants to ask one old, devastating question. Can I actually convert this claim into the real thing right now? That question flips the entire system from price risk into settlement risk. And those are not the same animal. When you face price risk, you might lose money. When a system faces settlement risk, the entire mechanism can seize. Volatility explodes, margins rise. And at that point, confidence, not collateral, not silver, not gold, not dollars, becomes the only true backing of the system. We already have hard evidence that this transition is underway. In late December 2025, silver had more than doubled across the year, briefly touching around $80 per ounce. The CME responded by raising margin requirements as volatility became extreme. The market violently corrected. Most people watching that move thought the pressure had been resolved. It had not. The exchange deployed the one tool it always uses in Stage 3. It throttled leverage to temporarily reduce pressure on the physical base. The underlying constraint did not disappear. The system bought time. There is a critical difference between those two things, and misreading it is what leaves most people exposed when the next leg arrives. Stage 4 is where systems do not collapse. They mutate to survive. And they survive by choosing from exactly 3 available options. They raise the price high enough to ration physical demand. They raise margins high enough to ration paper leverage. Or they change the settlement rules to redirect pressure away from the scarce thing. Those are not opinions. Those are the only mechanical moves available to any leveraged claim system sitting on a finite base. And the person who suffers most in Stage 4 is always the one who was most comfortable in Stage 2, because they never updated their mental model when the stage changed around them. Let me prove this with 3 cases, not because history is entertaining, but because history is the proof of concept. 1944. The major powers design a new global financial order at Bretton Woods. The dollar is tied to gold at $35 per ounce. Every other major currency is tied to the dollar. The base is real metal. Settlement is possible. Stage 1 established. Through the 50s and 60s, the United States runs persistent military commitments, expanding domestic programs, and chronic trade deficits. Dollars flood the world. Foreign central banks accumulate stacks of dollar reserves. Paper claims still technically convertible into gold at that fixed price. The claim stack grows faster than the gold supply, but the system holds because everyone assumes not everyone will demand settlement at once. Stage 2, at full capacity. By the late 60s, France begins systematically converting dollar reserves into physical gold. Other nations follow. The system is now being stress-tested by the one thing it cannot absorb: concurrent demand for settlement. On August 15, 1971, Nixon appears on national television and closes the gold window permanently. No more conversion. The dollar survives, but its relationship to the base is severed forever. Stage 4, executed by executive order. What follows is the entire decade of the 70s. Double-digit inflation, oil shocks, currency chaos, and a total repricing of every real asset on Earth. Gold moves from $35 an ounce to over $800 by 1980. The base reasserted itself through price. It always does. Weimar Germany, a functioning monetary system cracked open by the cost of World War I and crushed beneath the reparations burden of Versailles. The government cannot meet its obligations through real productive output, so it does what every cornered government does. It issues claims faster than the economy creates the value to back them. By 1921, the situation is fragile. By 1923, it is catastrophic. Prices double, then double again, then reprice by the hour. Wheelbarrows of paper to buy a loaf of bread. The system fails so completely they are forced to introduce an entirely new currency backed by the one asset that cannot be inflated away: land. The mechanism is universal. A claim stack expanded beyond its base always pays the bill, either through devaluation or through default. There is no third exit. Now the case that maps most directly onto silver today. 1980, the Hunt brothers have accumulated a massive concentrated position in silver. The market has moved explosively in their direction, but the exchange is staring at a potential settlement crisis. And it does not negotiate with anyone's thesis, no matter how correct it might ultimately prove to be. Margins are raised. New speculative buying is restricted. Participation is constrained. Silver collapses from nearly $50 per ounce back to single digits in a matter of weeks. Whether you view the Hunts as visionary investors or reckless speculators is entirely irrelevant, because the mechanism does not care about your sympathies. In Stage 3, the system protects its own survival first, every time, without exception. Now bring it forward to today, and watch how cleanly this pattern fits. Silver is real. It is finite. It is industrially essential, consumed in solar panels, electronics, medical devices, and defense manufacturing, with no practical substitute in most of those applications. The COMEX exists because physical settlement is embedded in its design, even though the vast majority of participants never intend to take delivery. The credibility of the entire structure rests on the premise that delivery is possible when demanded. Stage 1. Verified. The modern financial world operates as Stage 2 by structural default, global debt above 235% of GDP, monetary expansion deployed as the automatic response to every crisis since 2008. A derivatives complex that dwarfs physical commodity flows by orders of magnitude. In silver specifically, paper contracts represent quantities of metal that dwarf the registered deliverable stocks at any given moment. No conspiracy is required to explain this. Only incentives. The incentives of liquidity, hedging, and the carry profit available in a leveraged system during a long period of stability. And Stage 3 has already announced itself. Now let me make the 25 million ounce figure precise, because precision is the only thing that separates real analysis from noise designed to get your attention and take your money. A standard COMEX silver futures contract represents 5,000 troy ounces. 25 million ounces divided by 5,000 ounces per contract equals exactly 5,000 contracts. 5,000 participants deciding they want real metal instead of a paper promise is all it takes to translate paper exposure into a genuine physical demand problem. And the part almost nobody talks about, Even if the system can eventually source every single ounce somewhere on the planet, the timing mismatch is where the crisis is actually born. The short side does not get to say, relax, I can find the metal in a few weeks. The clearinghouse says, post additional collateral right now, because volatility and delivery risk have changed today. The calendar does not negotiate with anyone's timeline. The delivery schedule creating tomorrow's pressure is publicly published by CME Clearing. February 25th is listed as a key last trade date for February metals contracts. February 26th is tied to delivery intent and the final metal storage report. February 27th is when the actual storage debits and credits are banked. This is scheduled with the precision of a surgery, and when that calendar turns, positions that were comfortable as paper become physical obligations, and that is the exact moment the system gets honestly tested. When you hear the phrase margin call, hell starts tomorrow, the precise meaning is this. As the system moves into the final reporting and banking days of the delivery cycle, participants who were safely positioned in paper contracts become exposed to physical delivery obligations. A margin call is not an opinion, a warning, or a suggestion. It is a formula. When volatility rises, initial margin requirements rise with it. When your position moves against you, variation margin drains your available cash in real time, automatically. When liquidity thins, slippage multiplies every loss. When your collateral is depleted, you are liquidated at market, regardless of whether your underlying thesis is correct. The system does not grade on a curve. It does not award points for being right eventually. It tests only whether you can survive the specific path to that outcome. If enough longs decide not to roll their contracts, not to cash settle, not to accept a negotiated buyout, and instead press for physical delivery, the short side has exactly two available responses: source the metal fast or buy back the paper fast. Both responses are price positive, both are liquidity destructive, and the cascade that follows is not speculation. It is forced deleveraging, the invisible fire that spreads faster than news, turns hedged positions into emergency selling, and forces rational participants to make decisions under a clock that answers to no one. Now let me dismantle 3 myths that people reach for when they want to stay comfortable inside a Stage 3 environment. These myths are not just wrong, they are actively dangerous to anyone who acts on them. The first myth is that American scale places the U.S. financial system outside the reach of these mechanical laws. U.S. federal debt stood at approximately $38.5 trillion at the start of 2026. Debt is leverage, and the heavier the leverage load a system carries, the more violently sensitive it becomes to rate shocks, liquidity shocks, and confidence shocks. The mathematics of claim systems do not contain a carve-out for geography, military power, or reserve currency status. No system in history has ever been exempt. None ever will be. The second myth is that modern financial technology eliminates the risk by making the system more efficient. Technology accelerates every process it touches, including the process of liquidation during a panic. It improves matching and price discovery in stable conditions. It improves the speed at which losses are crystallized in unstable ones. It does not create silver that does not exist. The constraint is physical. No software has ever repealed physics. The third myth, the most seductive one, is that silver is just a commodity and could not possibly stress anything systemically important. This framing is completely wrong. The system at risk is not the silver market. The system at risk is leverage itself, the entire architecture of claims exceeding bases. Silver is the battlefield where that leverage is currently meeting physical constraint. If it were not silver, it would express somewhere else because the pattern is embedded in the system's structure, not in any single commodity. The leverage finds the constraint. It always does. So what does the actual mechanical sequence look like as the delivery window closes? Open interest sits elevated going into the delivery month. A subset of long signals intent to stand for physical delivery rather than roll forward. Short-side participants discover that sourcing physical metal at current prices and current volatility is materially harder than their risk models assumed. The clearinghouse demands additional collateral because settlement risk and volatility have simultaneously increased. The weakest, most leveraged participants cannot post the required margin and must close their positions at market, which moves price against the remaining shorts. That price movement triggers another round of variation margin calls. The cycle tightens and accelerates until enough positions are forcibly liquidated that the system recovers breathing room. That is what margin call hell actually describes, a mechanical cascade, not a headline. And Stage 4 does not arrive as a single cinematic breaking point. It arrives as a series of controlled mutations designed to preserve the system at the expense of whoever is least prepared. Higher prices to ration physical demand. Higher margins to price out leveraged speculators. Roll incentives to redirect longs away from standing for delivery. and a careful public narrative explaining why all of this is orderly, expected, and a sign of a healthy market functioning as intended. Whether you call it a default, a policy response, a controlled repricing, or normal market function depends entirely on which side of the claim stack you happen to be standing on when the music stops. Here is the most important thing I can leave you with. Even if the exchange can ultimately source every ounce of silver demanded by every standing long, you can still get a full liquidity crisis. Because the crisis is not determined by total global silver supply. It is determined by timing, financing costs, and concentrated positioning under elevated volatility. A market can be technically solvent across a long enough horizon and still be violently, catastrophically illiquid in a specific 72-hour window. Margin is a moment-by-moment test. It does not care about your long-term thesis. A multi-claim system built on a finite base reconciles eventually. That reconciliation arrives through margins, through liquidation, and through repricing. It happened when the gold window closed. It happened in the Weimar collapse. It happened on the floor of the COMEX in 1980. It is happening now because the world is running on the heaviest leverage load in recorded history. And when genuine physical settlement pressure rises inside a delivery window, the system must simultaneously ration both leverage and demand. It has no other option. This time is different is the lullaby people sing when they are comfortable in stage 2. Stage 3 is when the lullaby ends. Stage 4 is when the bill arrives. And the bill always arrives. In the next video, we go deeper into the actual architecture, how the paper-silver structure was specifically built, why delivery windows function as the system's pressure valves, and what the precise indicators look like when a system is actively choosing between repricing, rule changes, and forced deleveraging. If you are still watching right now, you already understand more about how this system actually operates than the vast majority of people currently holding positions inside it. Subscribe, because the next move on this calendar is not going to pause for anyone who needs time to catch up.